Second Sun Series, Part 5, The Mystery of the Primeval Sun, In the Shadow of Your Wings. I'm Bled Scry. Please like and subscribe. In Part 1 of this series, I talked about the book The Saturn Myth and David N. Talbot's theory that Saturn was our primeval sun in ancient days. How long ago Saturn was much closer to the Earth and was fixed in our north sky, with it acting as a second sun after sunset, illuminating the night sky in a radiant purple light. After some cosmic event, that all changed to our current sky situation and left us with the only sun we now know. To start off this study, we are going to revisit a quote from the Saturn myth by David N. Talbot. But the Sumero-Babylonian pantheon is filled with competing figures of the primordial creator. Enki, or Ea, Ningirsu, Ninurta, Tamuziak appears as a local formulation of the same great god. Each shares in the character of the singular An, ruling as universal lord, fashioning his home above and radiating light in the midst of the celestial ocean. Here, as in Egypt, the god of archaic monotheism is not a transcendent spirit or invisible power, but a central light. A Sumerian epic to Ninurta proclaims, Anu, in the midst of heaven, gave him fearful splendor. Ninurta, according to the text, is like Anu, and cast a shadow of glory over the land. All Mesopotamian figures of the primeval god possess this tangible character, and accounts of the god's radiant appearance are more of a historical than a speculative nature. The primeval sun was the central light, and its radiant light cast a shadow of glory over the land. Now, Mr. Talbot believes that this was just the planet Saturn. I'm not so sure of that. The National Menorah is a large menorah located in the northeast quadrant of the ellipse near the White House in Washington, D.C. It was first lit in 1979 by President Jimmy Carter, and now every president since has lit the menorah in ceremony. The menorah has grown in size as well, and it now stands 30 feet high. Remember, as we have discussed in previous videos, that Shamash is another name of the primeval sun god Saturn. The many obelisks around the world are symbols coming from Heliopolis, the city of Atum-ra, another name for the primeval sun. The obelisk is another symbol for the center light coming from Saturn in ancient days. Oftentimes, the Shamash, or center light on menorahs, stand above the other lights. Traditionally, all other lights of the menorah are lit from the Shamash candle, paying respect to the central light of ancient days, Saturn. It wasn't a coincidence that they decided to put the menorah close to the Washington, D.C. monument. The Shamash, or center light of the menorah, is pointing towards the six-pointed star of Saturn at its north pole, mentioned in Amos 5:26. The quantum, or branches or stalks of the menorah, form the bottom of the shadow of the rings of Saturn, the primeval sun. The lit candles above cast the shadow of the rings below. The Shamash, or center light of the menorah, is pointing towards the six-pointed star of Saturn at its north pole. In the bottom right, a view of the obelisk in Buenos Aires, Argentina, the host site for the 2018 G20 Leaders Summit. Notice how the menorah forms the bow-like shape of the shadow of the rings of Saturn. Note the purple light on the obelisk monument. The purple light is symbolic of the ancient daylight, now known as night, that was cast from the primeval sun Saturn. Remember, the ancient days began at sunset and Saturn was the central light. Judaism still keeps the tradition of the day starting at sunset. It is no coincidence that the world leaders met here in 2018. The Saturnic cult is worldwide. Please take your time and take in the images. Pause the video if you need to. The shadow of the menorah symbolizes the ancient primeval sun's shadow it cast over the earth. The bow-like curved design of the menorah is symbolic of the rings, or the wings, of Saturn. The obelisk points up to the six-pointed star symbol, which originates from Saturn's north pole in its hexagonal storm cloud. The shadow of the rings also form the shape of black bull horns, explaining the minivis form of atum-ra, the primeval sun, Saturn. The six-pointed star is represented today as the Star of David. The obelisk is an ancient symbol of the center light coming down from Saturn, and it is no coincidence that the Star of David is sometimes found under the shamash candle on menorahs. Remember Amos 5:25 through 26 and its reference to the star of your god Saturn. After this video, please go back and watch all of my videos to make sure you're not missing some of these topics that we have already discussed. The National Menorah, located in the northeast quadrant of the ellipse near the White House in Washington, D.C. By moving the obelisk back here, I hope you can see the parallel formed in the design of Washington, D.C. with its obelisk. The design mirrors the shadow cast by Saturn in ancient days. It all goes back to Saturn worship. The ellipse reflects the obelisk of the primeval sun symbol. Notice how the ellipse waters reflect the Washington, D.C. monument down. As above, so below. The Saturnic cult's goal is revealed. They wish to return to the golden age of Saturn, or Satan. The age of Saturn was known as the Golden Age. The Golden Age may be a phrase that sounds familiar if you are an American. Saturnic cult symbolism in Trump's inauguration ceremony. Donald Trump is sworn in on January 20th, 2025 for his second term as president. The Golden Age of America begins right now. Donald Trump's opening line of his inauguration speech. See if you can connect the symbolism used by Trump and Melania to show where their allegiance lies. I've included the symbols to the side of each of them to help. Trump's purple tie is symbolic of the center light of Saturn, and Melania's hat is a black sun symbol. She made sure to have the shadow of the brim cover her eyes, forming the shadow of the rings. The primeval sun, Saturn, was a central light of ancient days. What we now know as night, the shadow of glory over the land, was from the rings of Saturn. According to Strong's Concordance, the Hebrew word often translated for wings in the Bible is kanaf. In Judaism, they continue to keep the commandments of having fringes tied to the corners or quarters of their clothing. The same word, kanaf, was used for these corners or quarters. When the Jews pray, or those practicing Judaism, they cover their heads with the prayer shawl with these fringes. This is symbolic of the shadow of the wings cast from Saturn. Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. Exodus 19:4. Thou shalt make thee fringes upon the four quarters of thy vesture, wherewith thou coverest thyself. Deuteronomy 22:12. Keep me as the apple of the eye, hide me under the shadow of thy wings. Psalms 17:8. Because thou hast been my help, therefore in the shadow of thy wings will I rejoice. Psalm 63:7. He shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. Psalms 91:4. Now it is important to note here that all Saturn connections that I show in these videos is not an attack on the people who practice these religions. I love everyone, and I'm just giving my opinion of what this all goes back to. I believe most people have no clue what all this goes back to. But I do believe that many of the elite do know the truth of these symbols and customs. That is who I am referring to when I talk about the Saturnic cults today. The Hebrew word for wing, kanaf, is related to the Egyptian god Kneph. Kneph, also as Kemeth, is a god and motif of divinity in ancient Egyptian religious art, variously represented as a winged egg, a globe surrounded by one or more serpents, or Amun, in the form of a serpent called Kemetef. Notice how the bow in Kneph matches the bow in the rings of Saturn, of how it could have appeared in the ancient sky. When it says Kneph was sometimes more serpents, I believe each serpent only added to the resemblance of Saturn's multiple rings. Amun, or Amun-Ra, is the primeval sun, Saturn, just another connection between the Hebrew language and Saturn as it was worshipped by the Egyptians. Thou shalt make thee fringes upon the four quarters of thy vesture, wherewith thou coverest thyself. Deuteronomy 22:12. Kanaf, the Hebrew word used for wing, is used to describe the corners of the prayer shawls. So symbolically, they are covering themselves with the Lord's wings. The shadow of the Lord's wings, the primeval sun, Saturn. He shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. Psalms 91:4. Messiah's words to the Pharisees. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. Was Messiah referring to the God of the Old Testament? Under his wings shalt thou trust his truth. I'm Bled Scry. Please like and subscribe, and continue to join me as we explore this great mystery. In my next video, we will explore more of the Egyptian Kneph and get into its connections with the Gnostic demiurge. Please watch out for that video. Thanks for watching.